Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone, and this is one more neoliberalism show. It's called More Wages, of Neoliberalism. And we will go over, a number of issues raised by neoliberalism in this show. Specifically, we'll cover the Kaiser Strike, which is going on right now in the United States. Another strike by a union that's a very good union. And we'll also be discussing the statements, of AMLO, the president, of Mexico, urging the U.S. to stop fueling migration with sanctions on Latin American nations. We're also going to cover the fact that we have record U.S. fracked gas exports, which is very, very bad news for the climate. But it's what the United States is doing these days, in spite of the fact that we're supposed to be dealing with a climate emergency. The way we're dealing with that climate emergency is in many ways to make it worse. And then we're also going to discuss how the Medicare Advantage programs are overbilling taxpayers. Well, we know they're not really overbilling taxpayers, but they're overbilling the government by $140 billion per year. Why? That was more than what Ukraine has been billing the government. I just had to say that. I couldn't resist. So, anyway, here we are. I'm going to start with the Kaiser Strike and proceed to the others. I expect to be joined by DPD peers fairly soon, but I don't know exactly when, so until then, I'm just going to go ahead. This is from Common Dreams, and there are the Kaiser healthcare workers walking the picket line in Los Angeles on October 4th, 2023. Quote, "It's time we have their back," unquote. Progressive lawmakers voice solidarity with striking Kaiser workers. Quote, "If Kaiser can afford to pay its CEO over $15.4 million, it can afford to treat all of its workers with respect," said Senator Bernie Sanders. Meanwhile, Bernie is getting attacked because of his position on the Ukraine war, but that discussion is beyond the scope of this program on neoliberalism. The largest healthcare worker strike in U.S. history entered its second day on Thursday. That, of course, was today, October 5th. And this article was done on October 5th. It's by Jake Johnson of Common Dreams. Largest healthcare worker strike in U.S. history entered its second day on Thursday with the backing of progressive members of Congress who voiced solidarity with Kaiser Permanente employees in their fight for better wages and an end to chronic understaffing at facilities across the country. Quote, "Safe staffing levels and living wages are critical to delivering high-quality health care to the millions of Californians covered by Kaiser." Thanks, honey. Unquote. Representative Barbara Lee, Democrat of California, the person who should have been appointed as the acting senator by Gavin Newsom, but who was not. Uh, anyway, Barbara Lee, the 2024 U.S. Senate candidate, and of course, a very senior member of the House of Representatives, wrote on social media Wednesday calling on Kaiser management to, quote, bargain in good faith, unquote. Other prominent lawmakers in the House and Senate, including Senators John Fetterman and Bernie Sanders, and Representatives Cori Bush, Ro Khanna, and Katie Porter, also voiced support for the striking workers, and I have been joined by Dee Pierce, at this point, and I'm going to let her in.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing, Dee?
Okay. Oh, that's Colby. What's the matter, Colby?
I think we have Colby also.
Yes.
So, what I wanted, what I was in the middle of here was the first article I had for tonight, which was about the striking Kaiser workers and the Kaiser Strike, somewhat more generally than that. That's the first instance, of a conflict, resistance against the forces, of neoliberalism in the United States. So I was just going through a list of the prominent lawmakers in the House and Senate uh, who are declaring solidarity with the workers, and these included, first of all, Barbara Lee, and some of the others, John Fetterman, a Democrat of Pennsylvania, Bernie Sanders, independent of Vermont, Representatives Cori Bush, who's a House Democrat. She's a Missouri House Democrat. Ro Khanna, Democrat from California, also House Democrat. And Katie Porter, a Democrat from California. Both Katie Porter and Barbara Lee are running for the Senate seat that was vacated by Dianne Feinstein due to her death. And I mentioned earlier that the interim appointment by Gavin Newsom was not of any of the major candidates, but he picked someone out of the hat who just was involved in an anti-union activity to serve as the acting senator, until the election takes place. I'm not sure when that election will take place. I don't know how long it will be before the Senate election takes place. I don't know whether the interim appointment is to fulfill the term, of Dianne Feinstein, which would have ended at the end of December 2024. The election may be then, in November 2024. I don't know whether it'll go that long or whether there'll be a special election that will be done somewhat earlier. Quote, during the height of COVID, we all said that healthcare workers were absolutely essential, and we applauded them for their bravery and courage, unquote, Khanna said in a video message. Quote, now it's time we have their back to make sure that they're paid fairly and treated with respect. I guess, I have to say that now it's way past time that they were paid fairly and treated with respect. But of course, Sanders, the chair of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, the HELP Committee in the Senate, wrote that, quote, if Kaiser can afford to pay its CEO over 15.4 million, it can afford to treat all of its workers with respect. I have to say that's a reasonably vague statement, uh, since we don't know what Bernie means by treating all of the workers with respect exactly. But going on, more than 75,000 Kaiser workers, including nurses, pharmacists, radiology technicians, and call center representatives, walked off the job early Wednesday in California, Colorado, and Oregon. In other states, after around 6 months of contract negotiations that did not produce an acceptable agreement, the previous contract expired on September 30th. We have some Kaiser workers striking in the Kaiser Mid-Atlantic region as well. Uh, there was a 3-day period of strikes. This was one of the days. Uh, I had a procedure done today. I didn't experience the strike because the installation that I went to, or the procedure I was getting, did not involve those workers. While the walkouts are expected to end Saturday morning, the coalition of unions that represents the striking workers has said it is prepared to launch a bigger and longer strike next month if the company continues engaging in unfair labor practices and refusing to meet core wage and staffing demands. Understaffing at Kaiser has resulted in delays in patient care and left workers feeling burnt out, and overwhelmed. I have to say, I think to some degree this is true even for the doctors, that there may not be enough doctors at Kaiser as well. The wait times this fall or this year have been longer than in past years. But going on. And low pay in areas with high cost of living has forced some healthcare workers to sleep in their cars. As Kaiser, a nonprofit that benefits hugely from tax exemptions, rakes in billions. Quote, frontline health workers are awaiting a meaningful response from Kaiser executives regarding some of our key priorities, including safe staffing, outsourcing protections for incumbent healthcare workers, and fair wages to reduce turnover, unquote. Caroline Lucas, a spokesperson for the coalition of Kaiser Permanente unions, said in a statement late on Wednesday, quote, healthcare workers within the coalition remain ready to meet at any time, said Lucas. Unquote again, currently the strike continues and there are no sessions scheduled, at this hour. And the SEIU UHW union said, as this is a Service Employees International union, said the largest healthcare worker strike in U.S. history is happening right now. Retweet RT to stand with healthcare workers, across the country. Hashtag United for All, hashtag Solidarity Season, hashtag at about KP, and at KP Thrive. And there's a little video there, which I will not play. The striking Kaiser employees are among more than 400,000 U.S. workers in a range of sectors who have walked off the job this year in pursuit of better pay, benefits, and conditions. The United Auto Workers, currently striking at the big 3 U.S. car manufacturers, celebrated the Kaiser strike as part of a broader working class fight for justice. Quote, today we stand in solidarity with the 75,000 members of our union family who were on strike at Kaiser, unquote. UAW President Shawn Fain said Wednesday. Shawn Fain is a wonderful firebrand, uh, perhaps the best leader since Walter Reuther himself. Quote, whether you work in a hospital or behind a desk or on an assembly line, your fight is our fight. We all deserve dignity on and off the job. We all deserve a future for our families and our economies. We all deserve our fair share of the economy that we as working people create and run. To our union family on strike at Kaiser, the UAW has your back, unquote. Okay, I as well stand in support, okay, of the Kaiser strike, and I hope the workers get what they need. We have a little health care, have more than a little health care from Kaiser, okay, because there's people, okay, who are 84 years old, always going over there for this or that or the other thing. And of course, we've gotten to know, okay, a lot of the people, but who are among those, okay, who are going on strike, and we know they've been overloaded. We know that their burden at work has been greatly increased, and we know that this is due to the attempts by the Medicare Advantage program, which Kaiser is running, okay, at this point, to squeeze those profits out, not just so they can pay the $15.4 million to their chief executive, or whatever that figure was, but also because they're also paying other top executives very, very good salaries. It's not simply the president. All through the executive ranks, high salaries, okay, are being paid. And when it comes to the frontline workers, Kaiser has been holding off and playing hardball with the frontline workers. It would be one thing, okay, if Kaiser were a company that was on the stock market and that was trying to protect its stock value. I'm not saying that would justify it. Okay, what I'm saying is, because that doesn't justify it, I don't think anything justifies unfair treatment of workers. But okay, the point is, in Kaiser's case, it doesn't even have that excuse. It is a nonprofit organization, not being overlooked by stockholders. It can afford to pay its people more. It instead has chosen to use its surpluses for other purposes than to pay its workers a fair living wage. That's in line with the cost of living in the areas where Kaiser operates. And in Kaiser Mid-Atlantic as well, the cost of living is very high in Maryland and DC, okay, and Virginia, where Kaiser, okay, is operating. And the Kaiser workers certainly need a raise. Dee, any comments?
Well, I think it's a great idea that they're, just unions everywhere. I like when they're standing up, when the people are standing up. That's something that's been long needed in the country. And they've been suppressing them. We know the Democratic Party hasn't done anything. where unions are concerned, and I'm just happy to see people really standing up and fighting back.
Yes, and I am too. They're fighting back against, but not only the managers, but also neoliberalism and its excuses. Okay,
Right.
as well. It's an ideology that is poisonous. It's an ideology that the managers simply embrace. It justifies to them unfair treatment, okay, of workers because the ideology is profits over people. And of course, even though they don't apply that particular maxim to themselves as the managers, they certainly do apply it in spades to their workers. They feel perfectly well justified in paying their workers as little, okay, as possible and giving them as little in benefits, okay, as possible, okay, as well.
Yes, I see Kay's here.
Oh, hi, Kay.
Good to see Kay.
How you doing? Hope you're well. Okay, so the second article, okay, I want to deal with tonight is okay. It's an article also from Common Dreams, and there's a photo of Venezuelan migrants crossing the Rio Grande from Mexico into the United States in Eagle Pass, Texas, on September 30th, 2023. This photo is from John Moore, okay, of Getty Images. The headline is Mexican president urges U.S. to stop fueling migration with sanctions on Cuba and Venezuela. We're going to keep insisting on addressing the root causes of migration, said uh, um, um, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, uh, um, um, AMLO, quote, sanctions and blockades cannot be maintained, unquote, says AMLO. This piece was done by Brett Wilkins of the Common Dream staff on October 3rd, 2023. Stressing the need for, quote, addressing the root causes of migration, Mexican President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador on Monday blamed U.S. sanctions against countries including Cuba and Venezuela for driving the surge of migrants crossing his country to seek better lives in the United States. Speaking at his daily press briefing, Lopez Obrador said the 10,000 migrants per day make their way to Mexico's border with the United States. The president lamented the deaths of 9 Cuban women and 1 girl who, after entering Mexico from Guatemala, were hiding in an overloaded cargo truck that crashed in the southern state of Chiapas on Sunday. 17 other migrants were injured in the crash. AMLO linked the migrants' deaths to the internationally condemned U.S. embargo of Cuba, which, according to a 2018 report by a United Nations Commission, has cost the small island nation at least 130 billion over the past 7 decades. In my view, that money should be paid back to Cuba in one lump sum. The United States can afford to do that. It is shown that it can afford to do that because, of course, it's in the process of giving $130 billion to Ukraine so it can carry on a futile war against uh, Vladimir Putin, and Russia. Quote, that's why we're going to keep insisting on addressing the root causes of migration, the origins, he said. Quote, get to the core and stop politicking, think human rights over ideology. Sanctions and blockades cannot be maintained. We must help the countries with the most poverty. There must be universal brotherhood, unquote, said AMLO. And there's a statement in Spanish there that I won't attempt to translate, though I could probably translate part of it. But there, is AMLO speaking. He repeated his criticism of ongoing U.S. military aid to Ukraine in the face of so much poverty and suffering closer to home. How much have they destined to the war in Ukraine? 30 or 50 billion for the war, which is the most irrational thing that can be, and harmful, unquote, he said. Of course, he grossly underestimated the amount that Congress has appropriated for Ukraine. It is now, I believe, as high as 130 billion. Last Friday's press briefing, Lopez Obrador noted the U.S. is spending a lot more for the war in Ukraine than what they give to help with poverty in Latin America and the Caribbean. So what does this all have to do with neoliberalism? We have to ask ourselves the question, why has the U.S. been following a foreign policy in Europe designed to surround Russia? Why did they support the coup in Ukraine in 2014? Why have we been arming, along with NATO nations, the state of Ukraine for years and years and years before the current war started in February of 2022? What were we trying to do? Well, since the war started, based on various statements by Western leaders themselves, the purpose of that was to weaken Russia, but not simply to weaken. The purpose was to destroy the Russian Federation. The purpose was to change the regime there. But what was that about? It was about wanting to get back to the circumstances that we enjoyed in Russia during the 1990s, when we participated in looting the material resources of Russia for almost a decade, when Russia was being run, by Yeltsin, who was extremely friendly to the West and extremely friendly to the ideologies, of neoliberalism. Now, Putin stopped all that when he came in, but the truth is that was our aim there. It was to make a place for our companies to loot Russia once again, as they had been doing during a decade, of the 1990s. The Russians lost 10 million people, at least 10 million people, 10 to 15 million people dead from the effects of imposing neoliberalism on their country, which Yeltsin and his U.S. economic advisors collaborated to impose on Russia those kinds of policies, which resulted in the loss of jobs, in Russia, people drinking alcohol they distilled, at home, from which millions of people died. They died also from addiction to alcohol, caused by desperation because men couldn't find work. The 10 to 15 million people who died were mostly males. The period of the 1990s was a disaster for Russia, and it was a neoliberal disaster. And our foreign policy has been aimed at trying to repeat that particular disaster going on. The president urged the U.S., quote, to remove blockades. The president, again, refers to AMLO here, quote, to remove blockades and stop harassing independent and free countries, and to implement, quote, an integrated plan for cooperation. So the Venezuelans, the Cubans, the Nicaraguans, and Ecuadorians, Guatemalans, and Hondurans wouldn't be forced to emigrate, unquote. Lopez Obrador's remarks, which came as senior Biden administration officials, including Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, and Attorney General Merrick Garland, prepared to visit Mexico this week, echo recent comments by Colombian President Gustavo Petro. Quote, the blockade against Venezuela has had a boomerang-type response, now hitting the very United States, which is the one who decided to impose the blockade. So knocking at their door is the population that they drove into poverty, unquote. Petro, Colombia's first leftist president, said to Democracy Now! On September 21st, quote, many Venezuelans have left, and now they want us to make it to the United States, he said. Quote again, how can one partially reduce the exodus? Well, lift the blockade against Venezuela. The scars of history, the invasions from before, the old imperialism, the old domination continue to weigh against humanity, unquote, Petro added, and quote again. That is why a government such as the Biden administration should let the scars heal. They're not going to go away, but let them heal. End blockades and open up a plural dialogue, which I think would benefit all of us, both in North America and in South America. Under U.S. pressure, Mexico has cracked down on migrants in an effort to stop refugees, asylum seekers, and those looking for better economic conditions from reaching the country's shared border. Checkpoints, discrimination, and alleged human rights crimes, including shootings with live ammunition and rapes, have increased in parts of Mexico, especially near its southern and northern borders. Meanwhile, human rights defenders have documented continued, quote, frequent and severe, unquote, abuse of migrants. Some American citizens allegedly perpetrated by U.S. Department of Homeland Security personnel at the southern border. So that's the article. I welcome that statement, of AMLO and Gustavo Petro's statements, as well. We have to lift our sanctions on so many countries. We are sanctioning countries all over the world We are hurting the economies of many of these nations. Russia has been able to stand up to our sanctions, and their economy now continues to grow, and is predicted to grow rather rapidly next year, probably more rapidly than the US economy. But most of these nations have not been strong enough to stop the sanctions from doing severe damage, to their countries. Now, out of a sense of pride and a fierce sense, of independence, a severe desire for independence, many countries have resisted, the sanctions. But the sanctions have done major damage to them and continue to do major damage to them. And the sanctions do not help the United States. They do not help our population. They are doing no good for the American people. We must get rid of these sanctions, in my view. D, what do you think?
I agree. The sanctions, the blockades, the sanctions, it's terrible. I mean, it does no good. All it does is harm. It harms people. And we've heard many countries say it harms worse than bombs because it's the starvation. They're not getting their needs met. It causes such. It's like a weapon of mass destruction. Sanctions. And then we see all the people coming in here. Well, that's because of us.
Yes. So 3 years ago, it was estimated that the freezing of, I believe it was $1 billion of Venezuelan gold reserves in London banks, I think at the Bank of England, at the behest, of the United States, the freezing of those reserves led to the deaths of 50,000 people, in Venezuela, because that country didn't have the foreign exchange to import key medical supplies. So that sanction, against the government, of Venezuela, cost 50,000 lives. Sanctions can be hugely damaging, and the thing we have to understand about them is that they are legal under international law. They represent collective punishment of populations prohibited by international law.
And that's why they shouldn't be done. But somehow certain countries get away with doing sanctions. Sanctions and other things that are against international law, certain countries get away with it, and it is wrong.
Why does the population of the United States continue to tolerate violations of international law by the US government every single day of the year for years on end? Because that's what these sanctions are. You never hear from the mass media that they're violations, of international law. You never hear from the mass media that they are collective punishment, of other nations, banned by solemn treaties that the United States signed.
Right.
And
And
yet
again,
our voters tolerate that. We don't
and they don't
understand
have.
that within the international system, more and more these days, we are the bad guys.
That's true. And it's sad. It really is.
And we need
And
to
it's
stop.
because, like you said, the media, the programming, that's the key, is that the programming of the people.
It
If
is the
people
key.
knew,
It is the key. There is programming of our people going on, and there has been for decades. Our people don't perceive the truth. They don't know the truth. They cannot hear the truth because the mass media is filling them, okay, with BS. Why, just the other day, Hillary Clinton but came on a show and was giving, okay, an interview. And of course, she was talking about one of her favorite subjects, which is Putin, okay,
oh,
and Russia, okay. And basically, she was blaming Putin for things going on in this country because of what she called the extreme skill of Putin, okay, as a manipulator, okay, of votes, okay, in other nations. She didn't seem to realize that her Russiagate fraud has long been shown to be a fraud by commentator after commentator.
mm-hmm. She's living in the past.
She's living in a fantasy world, and she wants us all to live in that same fantasy world.
And that whole Russia was nuts.
Yeah, Bonnie says she cannot carry a knife around.
Oh, hell for no.
Okay, a sword. She cannot carry a sword around.
No.
I don't want her to carry a sword around. Uh-oh. Watch out for that sword. So I'm going to share the screen for the next one, which is here's neoliberalism once again on the attack through fracking. Green groups warn record U.S. fracked gas exports, quote, bad news for our climate and public health, unquote. It is time for the White House, quote, it is time for the White House to put the public interest and our climate future ahead of fossil fuel industry profits, unquote, said one campaigner. This is by Brett Wilkins, also on October 4th, 2023, just yesterday. As the U.S. Department of Energy announced that the nation set a new record for fossil gas exports during the first half of 2023, green advocacy groups on Wednesday implored the Biden administration to put the public interest in our climate future ahead of fossil fuel industry profits by halting gas projects and exports. So there it is right there, folks. The Green Advocacy Group wants the Biden administration to put people over profits. And the fossil fuel industry wants to continue to put profits over people. That's the essence, okay, of neoliberalism. And the Biden administration's policies with respect to the fossil fuel industry are neoliberal policies. Biden is a neoliberal president. That is why things are not going so well, okay, in the United States. He is neoliberal directly with respect to economic policy. And of course, as we just suggested with respect to Ukraine, he is neoliberal also in supporting a neocon but foreign policy to create a weaker Russia that will allow our companies to loot it. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, quote, the United States exported more natural gas in the first half of 2023 than it did in the same period of any previous year, unquote. By the way, this also has to do with Europe, doesn't it? Because we had to export more natural gas, okay, to Europe because we blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, with exports averaging 24 billion cubic feet per day. The U.S. is the world's leading liquefied natural gas exporter. So it's not the Saudis doing this kind of exporting. It's not the Russians doing this kind of exporting. We're number one in exporting liquid natural gas to further destroy the environment, and the climate. The Energy Information Administration tweeted, quote, hashtag today in energy, U.S. hashtag exports of hashtag natural gas set a record high in the first half of 2023, hashtag energy trade, EIA.gov / today in energy, / and there is a chart showing the increases in the export of natural gas by the United States from January 2012 to June of 2023. Look at that growth in the monthly averages, of exports.
Hmm.
I mean, it has gone up by almost 4 times anyway. It's gone up by 4 times since 2012. In 11 years, 4 times as much liquid natural gas to cause a furthering of the climate crisis. Notice that all of our administrations since that time, the Obama administration, the Trump administration, the Biden administration, all neoliberal administrations, quote, record exports of fossil fuels are a direct result of Biden administration policies that are expanding fracking, pipelines, and LNG export facilities, all of which threaten to lock the world into more climate warming emissions from fossil fuels. Jim Walsh, policy director of the group Food and Water Watch, said in a statement, and quote again, these policies are bad news for our climate and public health, but will also continue to push up energy prices for U.S. consumers and will slow the transition to more affordable, clean, renewable energy options, unquote. Walsh added. Food and Water Watch tweeted, this is the result of continued expansion of fossil fuels. It can't be allowed to continue. We have the technology needed to transition to 100% renewable energy. We just need, the political will to make it happen. So, folks, a lot of the shows we do, the Dump the Corruption shows specifically, are about how to get the political will to make this happen. We have detailed and outlined in show after show how people in Congress are bought by special interests, including fossil fuel interests.
Mm-hmm.
And we have pointed out and emphasized that if we got rid of the interests by dumping the corruption, which is to say, by dumping the candidates and the office holders who are bought by these special interests, we could change the Congress and we could change the policies, and we would be able to develop the political will to make it happen. I think that's the only way we're going to develop, the political will to make that happen. The good news is that we have an opportunity to help develop that political will in the election of 2024. If we would only operate according to the dump the corruption rule. But of course, not many of us want to do that yet. Tyson Slocum, director of the energy program at the consumer advocacy group Public Citizen, accused the Biden administration of largely ignoring an 85-year-old federal mandate in the Natural Gas Act requiring exports to most countries to be, quote, consistent with the public interest, unquote. Of course, the export of that kind of energy is not consistent with the public interest of the United States. Quote again, as a result, our record gas exports expose American households to higher energy prices and increased price of volatility, poison black and brown communities who bear the brunt of LNG expansion on the United States Gulf Coast and exacerbate the climate crisis, unquote, Slocum said. And quote again, quote, the exports also drive increased domestic fracking and promote fossil fuels that compete with renewable energy. Quote, the Biden administration must halt all export authorizations until it acknowledges the impact record exports have on worsening domestic energy security for vulnerable Americans and commits to respect the public interest mandate, unquote, he added. There's a quote from the Zero Hour, okay, which is actually Richard Eskow, RJ Eskow. RJ says, we have one more year of record-breaking export of liquefied natural gas, LNG, is nothing to celebrate. It's time to hashtag end fossil fuels. Instead, the U.S. continues to export emissions around the world. Okay. EIA.gov/today in energy /. In addition to approving or backing climate-wrecking fossil fuel expansion, including the Willow Project in Alaska, the Mountain Valley Pipeline in West Virginia, and oil drilling on public lands and offshore, the Biden administration has supported and expanded LNG projects at home and abroad with a special focus on export infrastructure. Reacting to the EIA figures, Walsh said that President Biden has a chance to reverse this dangerous trend. He can match his climate rhetoric with real climate action by determining that the proposed Calcasieu Pass 2 project in Louisiana, which would be the largest, which would be the country's largest export facility for fossil gas, is not in the public interest, unquote. Quote again, it is time for the White House to put the public interest in our climate future ahead of fossil fuel industry profits, unquote, he added. It's long past time, but I think the neoliberal president, Joe Biden, will never put the public interest ahead of fossil fuel industry profits because he's a neoliberal and he doesn't believe in people over profits, which is another reason to get rid of him at the earliest opportunity possible. D, would you like to add anything?
What we say, we have to dump the corruption.
We have to dump the corruption, indeed. And in dumping the corruption, we would dump both Joe Biden and also Donald Trump.
Right, both parties. Doesn't matter who's in office.
Both parties. We would dump all of the congressional office holders that we reviewed. We would dump their challengers for the major parties. We would almost certainly dump every congressman. in 2024, and we would dump 1/3 of the Senate as well.
Right, because they're not representing their people; they're representing corporations.
Exactly. So, okay, I'm going to get to. Oops. I'm going to get to the final article in just a moment. I forgot to share this on Facebook, so I'm gonna uh, I'm gonna cure that problem right now.
And you have people in the audience that have joined since.
Since we started.
Yeah.
So let me say hi to people. Okay. Robert Copeland says, let's say that the Russian economy does grow, but will the Russian people benefit, or only the Russian military companies be the only ones, okay, that benefit? Well, by all accounts, the Russian people are benefiting from the expansion of the economy in Russia, which is one of the reasons why Putin is so popular. Putin is extremely popular right now, okay, in Russia. Support for the war itself, okay, is very high. 350,000 people have been added, okay, to the Russian military forces but over the last year, mostly volunteers and contract soldiers of one kind, okay, or another. Robert Copeland said Hillary Clinton would be a very poor president if she was elected back in the 2016 elections. Yes, I think so. Of course, Trump was a very poor president also. F says, hello, doctor. F says, hello, D. I don't know who F is. Do you know who F is, D?
I'm not sure, but it's sounding a lot like Friar Steve the more I'm reading this.
If it were Friar Steve, wouldn't he just come in as Friar Steve?
Right.
So, Kay says, hi, Robert. And Brandy says, hey, guys. Hey, Brandy. And D says, hello, all. F says, 2009 State Department energy policy was bad for the environment in the U.S. F says, fossil fuel lobbyists run D.C. I know they do. I know they do, at least with respect to their sphere. The banks, okay, also run D.C. in their sphere, and the pharmaceutical companies in their sphere. We are a multipolar type of oligarchy. One of the poles is certainly the fossil fuel companies. That's an interesting idea. Multipolar oligarchy. Brandy says Jill Stein may be entering the race since West left the Green Party. Well, Jill Stein would be very welcome, I think, because she was a very good candidate in 2016, and she would be a very good candidate in 2024 as well. F says 2024, dump the corruption rule. Green Party is taking money from pro-Russian lobbyists. Start cleaning house there. I would like to see some links to that, F, because I don't think the Green Party has been taking money from pro-Russian lobbyists. Even that term is a very vague term, and the people need to be made. F says, get rid of Biden and replace him with whom? I don't know. Let the people make that choice. What I do know is bought politicians should not be president. That includes Biden and it includes Trump. Let the people choose to elect a president who is not taking any big money. F says, your plan leaves an awful big power vacuum. Yes, which the people will fill. What will fill that power vacuum, good doctor? According to Samuel Huntington, probably something worse. Samuel Huntington was at the time full of shit. F says only Russian oligarchs, are benefiting. It was obvious at the time that he was full of shit. There's no empirical data that supports what he wanted to do, in international politics. F says only Russian oligarchs are benefiting. Nonsense. Russians are warmongers, it sounds like. Oh, yeah? Who was mongering the war in Ukraine? Who was in back of the coup in 2014? Who was arming Ukraine from 2014 to 2023? Who is arming them now? Who is doing it in order to break the Russian Federation up? Robert Copeland says, even if we get dumped to corruption, there could be politicians elected. Well, of course. But there are 535 offices in the Senate, in the House. Yeah, we'll get 50 people that are against the people. But right now, we've probably got, 450 people who are against the people. The difference between 50 and 450 is the difference between good policy for the people and crap. Brandy says, Biden will lead us to World War III, so will Trump lead us to World War III. By the time the election of 2024 rolls around, the Ukraine war will be over. Biden will not get us into World War III, over Ukraine, unless he does it between now, and then. Well, I should say between now and the time, that the Russians win, which I think is going to be in the next 6-7 months. So, I don't think Biden is going to get us into World War III over this. I think they have shifted their focus to China. Biden would lead us to World War III over China, but so will Trump. That's why we must get rid of them both. There can be no Biden-Trump choice. We need to find a way to disqualify both Trump and Biden. Dump the corruption is that way. F says, I don't use YouTube much for your show. Hey, Friar Steve, how you doing? Friar Steve says, I went to a Green Party convention in 2016. Brandy says, Green Party takes no lobby money, nor corporate money. Friar Steve says he predicted ISIS. I'm sorry, who predicted ISIS? Oh, Samuel Huntington predicted ISIS? Fine. He predicted ISIS. So what? Did he predict the crash of 2008? Did he predict that Putin was going to be successful in building up Russia again? Did he predict that China was going to have the world's highest GDP in 2023 when you adjust GDP for purchasing power parity? In other words, the PPP adjusted GDP. China is now the number one economy in the world from the standpoint of that measure of GDP. Andy Candy says, hi, Joe D. Hi, folks. Doesn't Jill have a warrant for protesting at that rock place a few years ago? Was it Grey Rock? Sorry, I can't remember the name.
Standing Rock.
Standing Rock. Yeah, she may have an outstanding warrant for Standing Rock. I don't think that's going to prohibit her from running for the presidency. Kay says, okay, guys, I'm out of here tonight. Love you all. Thank you for coming, Kay. Putin had stole East Ukraine. East Ukraine was made up, okay, of Russians. In the Donbass, the two republics declared their independence, okay, from Ukraine. They exercised their self-determination according to UN rules, okay, in Ukraine. Then they invited Putin in to help to protect them, okay, against the attack from the government of the Ukraine that they had been suffering for 8 long years, from 2014 to 2022. Robert Copeland says, "What is Vanguard and BlackRock currently worth?" Off the top of my head, I don't know. Samuel's warning manifested in the caliphate, just like he warned. There was no caliphate. I mean, ISIS came around. Yes. But there is no caliphate. There's no caliphate now. We've suppressed that. Brandy says she agrees about Trump. Both parties are, and she probably left a pile of crap sitting there. And Friar Steve says, so creating power vacuums can have bad results. It can, but you're using a conservative argument here, Steve. Power vacuums can have good results too. It's up to us to make sure that we fill the power vacuums and not them. That's what this is about. It's about a revolution, but it's about a bloodless revolution. It's about a revolution using the ballot box, dumping the corruption through the ballot box. Robert Copeland says here in California, even if they pass good laws, it could be overturned by a ballot measure. Yeah, it could be overturned, okay, by a ballot measure, but then more good laws could be passed. Brandy says ISIS was created by the U.S. government. Yes, it was. And Farsi says clash of civilizations. Yes, there is a clash, okay, of civilizations. How else could we have gotten to the place that we're at? Friar Steve says, "Goof for China as long as they don't seek to steal the sovereignty of Taiwan." There is no sovereignty of Taiwan, Friar Steve. In the international system, Taiwan is recognized as a province of China. It doesn't have any sovereignty. Andy Kenny says, Joe, I saw one of your old shows where you got compared to Hulk. Okay, I loved it. You seemed on fire back then. I'm still on fire. It depends on the show. It depends on the subject. And I'm a human being, so it depends on my mood. Okay, yeah. The person comparing me to the Hulk was actually Carmen Muniz. Okay, Carmen hasn't been seen around these parts because she is very, very short of money and she needs help. Okay, she's a homeless person. She's a wonderful person. She still stays, okay, in contact with me, but I haven't heard from her in weeks, so I have to find out what's happened to her. So Friar Steve says can't rewrite history. Well, that's what I'm telling you. We cannot rewrite history. Taiwan has no sovereignty. Brandy says Taiwan is internationally recognized as a part of China. Not only that, it's still recognized as part of China on the U.S. State Department website. It's not just internationally recognized, it's recognized by the United States as part of China. What the United States has been trying to do is to detach Taiwan from China. But it still existed, so Samuel was correct. It never existed as a recognized state, Friar Steve. It never functioned as a state in international relations. It was a stateless entity. I don't think that's what Samuel Huntington was predicting. I think he was one of those nutcases who was predicting a caliphate that was going to come down, with nuclear weapons and was going to attack the West with those nuclear weapons. And Friar Steve says, when Stalin filled, a power vacuum. No, Stalin didn't fill, a power vacuum. The communists, the Bolsheviks, were in control. They were in control, when Lenin died. At that point, a struggle within, the Politburo over a period of years resulted in Stalin's winning. But he didn't fill, a power vacuum. That is, the Politburo still ruled Russia this time, unless you're claiming that there was a power vacuum left, by Lenin, and Stalin was the eventual victor in the power struggle. I agree with that. He was a victor, in the power struggle. But he had lots of opposition, and it took him a long time to emerge, as the victor. I mean, in the way you're using the term, Hitler also filled, a power vacuum. But you could also argue that George Washington filled, a power vacuum. That the Articles of Confederation filled, a power vacuum. I mean, Friar Steve, what are you talking about? Violence always overcomes the ballot box. No, it doesn't. It doesn't always overcome the ballot box. Here in the United States, we've been having relatively peaceful elections for years and years and years. Only recently have we been getting into a dangerous situation where violence may overcome the ballot box. It may overcome the ballot box in 2024, but it would not overcome the ballot box if we all exercise the dump the corruption strategy. Because Biden and Trump would get almost no votes. Everybody would be voting against them. This would so discourage the Trump supporters that there would be no violence. It would be a decisive rejection of both Trump and Biden and the role of money in politics. Friar Steve says Taiwan is sovereign. That is never going to change. Friar Steve, you are dreaming. Taiwan is not sovereign. There's going to be an election in 2024. The Kuomintang is going to win, and then they are going to negotiate a peaceful transition of Taiwan's political integration into mainland China. That's what is going to happen, Friar Steve. And there's a damn thing the United States can do about it. Joe, is it true that the Speaker of the House is third in line for the president? Well, I'm not sure what you mean by third in line. In other words, first in line is the vice president, second in line is the Speaker of the House. So Andy asked the question. So, okay, I think unless you say the president is first in line for president, then the Speaker of the House would be third in line. But the president, okay, is already the president. So the ones in line are the vice president. She's the first person in line. And then, okay, the line of succession goes, okay, to the Speaker of the House. So the Speaker of the House is second, okay, in line. And is that why fascist Guest is trying to put a hardliner, okay, in the position? No, I think there are a number of reasons why he's trying to put a hardliner, okay, into the position. He's trying to put a Trump supporter into the position. He's trying to put someone, okay, into the position who will continue to hold, okay, the Democrats hostage every time there's a debt ceiling negotiation, or a budget negotiation. He's trying to maximize the leverage of the Freedom Caucus, okay, in Congress. That's more generally what, okay, he's trying to do. Because, of course, the Freedom Caucus mostly is, I won't even say they're mostly the fascist caucus, because I think the fascist caucus is way larger than that. I think most of the Republicans are part of the fascist caucus. And Friar Steve says, green goes well with your red beret. Well, my red beret is for Medicare for all. If I were wearing, okay, a green beret, then, okay, it would be for the climate emergency. Friar Steve says, we'll never turn our back on Taiwan or South Korea, and we stand with Japan. Of course we will, Friar Steve. There are power realities. We're not going to fight, okay, a nuclear war for the sake of Taiwan. And we won't have to fight a nuclear war for the sake of South Korea and for the sake of Japan. Do you know why? Because both South Korea and Japan and also Taiwan are all major trading partners of China. They don't want to have a war with China, and China doesn't want to have a war with them. They just want to do business. Brandy says, the U.S. only uses and abuses other nations and islands for their resources. They don't give a damn about the people. Okay, I don't think the U.S. is a they. Okay, I think the U.S. is an it. Friar Steve says, exactly 100 Hitler also did. GW turned over power, so there's a difference. But that came later. In the beginning, he filled, okay, a power vacuum. Okay, so he filled a power vacuum and then he turned over power. Right. And if the people fill this power vacuum and they elect, okay, the right people, those people will strengthen democracy, okay, in the United States. Why is it that people always believe that more democracy is going to turn out very badly? when there are historical cases where more democracy has turned out very well. But there are almost no cases where oligarchy has turned out very well. Robert Copeland says lots of Russians died when Stalin took control of Russia. Huge, huge when Stalin took control of Russia. Notice that Putin has been in control of Russia for roughly 20 years now. And lots of Russians have not died. In fact, he stopped the ongoing deaths, of Russians. Putin is no Stalin. He's even tried to save lives, in Ukraine. It's obvious that he pulled his punches since the start of the war. Friar Steve says, good talk, Doc. Friar Steve says, Trump is a cult to the end. Yes. Andy Kenny says, yes, that's what I meant. Thanks for clarifying. Robert Copeland says, I've been hearing rumors that some Republicans want Donald Trump as Speaker of the House. Is that rumor true or false? No, I think it's true. And could it be done legally? Yes. If the whole Republican caucus were to unite behind Trump, if he were nominated, if someone made a floor speech and put what Donald Trump said, that he was running for Speaker of the House, and then 218 Republicans wanted him to be Speaker of the House, he would then become the Speaker of the House. On the other hand, there are probably enough Republicans still in the House who are not for Trump, combined with all the Democrats, would stop him from getting 218 votes. So he could not become the Speaker of the House. He won't become the Speaker of the House. So Friar Steve says China won't fight a nuclear war for Taiwan. If Taiwan declares independence, China will invade, Taiwan. They will leave it up to us as to whether we want to fight a nuclear war for the sake, of Taiwan. Here's the calculus. Are we willing to trade a Chinese city for Boston, a Chinese city for New York, maybe Beijing for Washington, D.C.? I don't think so, Friar Steve. We're not going to fight, a nuclear war for Taiwan. Thank you, Friar Steve. Friar Steve says, I sent a document for you. Crimea may fall soon. Ukraine is going to stand strong. Putin must face The Hague. Return Crimea children. Return stolen grain. Friar Steve. I think Friar Steve's been kidding me all along, try to get my dander up. Which he did. Friar Steve says, always remember his name is Vladimir KGB Putin. No, his name is actually Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. which stands for Vladimir, the son of Vladimir Putin. And Friar Steve says Chinese Communist Party sanctions will end them. Will end what? Will end China? We have even less of a chance of harming China's economy than we had of harming the Russian economy. And you saw what happened there. Nobody wins in a nuclear war when both sides, have nuclear weapons. Well, maybe not, Robert, but you know something? Right now, Russia, and I believe by now China too, because I think Russia supplied them with this. They supplied them with hypersonic missiles that can carry nuclear warheads. We can't shoot those down. There are enough of them at this point that they could probably destroy most of our major cities. They, on the other hand, will be able to shoot down some of our missiles. So yeah, nobody wins, in a nuclear war because there's lots of devastation for both sides. But right now, Russia and China are ahead in nuclear capability. Well, that's not strictly true. We have a lot more warheads than China has. But in the context of the hypersonic missiles, what China is at least in the process of getting from Russia, they will have a capability that we do not have. For as Steve says, we'll end the regime. This can be shown. Grain shipments would end. China can't take sanctions, like Russia. Well, Russia is going to supply China with grain. Friar Steve correctly points out that we have, anti-ballistic missiles, yes, but the anti-ballistic missiles are not fast enough to shoot the hypersonic missiles out of the sky. Robert Copeland said, I heard a missile attack where 50 civilians died at a funeral in a small village, in Ukraine. That may well be true. I don't know. There are missile attacks that are going on each day. And there may be 50 civilians who died at a funeral in a small village in Ukraine. That may be true. Whose fault is that? Who shelled the Donbass for 8 long years, killing 14,000 people? 14,000 civilians, Robert Copeland. Who did that? It was the Ukraine government. Friar Steve says, Doc, we still have superiority. I don't think we do, Friar Steve. Where does that superiority come from? They have more warheads than we have, the combination of Russia and China. And they have way faster missiles that we can't shoot out of the air. So where is the superiority we're talking about? Friar Steve says grain that Russia has comes from Ukraine. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Russia has become the major exporter of grain. More than Ukraine, much more than Ukraine. Friar Steve says Putin's fault. 1,400, that's false stock. Yes, it is. It was 14,000. In fact, by 2022, by the time of the war, it was 15,000. 15,000 civilians died from shelling by the Ukrainian government of Donbass. Brandy smiles and says, is that why the U.S. government has taken weapons from the National Guard to send to Ukraine? Because the U.S. government is superior? Well, this is, all very general, Brandy. There are lots of different phases of superiority. Right now, the Russians have superiority where it counts for nuclear war. That is to say, no, Friar Steve, it's not false. It's true. Most of the observers of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine know that, it is true. You have no basis for saying that that figure is false. If you have a basis, please put the links, in the comments. I'll be glad to consider them. Okay, anyway, what Brandy was saying is right, in the sense that when it comes to artillery superiority, when it comes to superiority in tanks, when it comes to superiority in missiles and numbers of missiles, right now, the Russians have superiority. Friar Steve is citing by UN reporting. Please provide the link, Friar Steve. Friar Steve says, I will send it to you. Please do, Friar Steve. Thank you. Okay. I did have a last article to cover. I do want to briefly cover it because I have something else planned for tomorrow, and I don't want it to hang over till tomorrow. So I am going to do one last article tonight, and it's the Medicare Advantage article. Medicare Advantage is for profit. Our lives should not be. That's the message of this photo. Advocates hold signs during a news conference on Medicare Advantage plans in front of the U.S. Capitol on July 25th, 2023. July 25th is the anniversary of Medicare. Medicare Advantage overbills taxpayers by $140 billion a year, enough to wipe out other Medicare premiums. So I love the meme about taxpayer money, but it is not true. It is false. It is not taxpayer money that pays for things. It is taxpayer. What taxes do is they drain money from the private sector. They do not pay for spending. So Medicare Advantage is not overbilling the taxpayers. It is overbilling the government. Quote, Medicare Advantage is just another example of the endless greed of the insurance industry poisoning American health care, says a new report from Physicians for a National Health Program. I love PNHP, but I wish they'd stop using the taxpayer meme. They're overcharging the government, so they're overcharging us collectively, but our taxes are not paying for it. A report published Wednesday estimates that privately run government-funded Medicare Advantage plans are overcharging U.S. taxpayers by up to $140 billion per year, a sum that could be used to completely eliminate the Medicare Part B premiums or fully fund Medicare's prescription drug program. Physicians for a National Health Program, PNHP, an advocacy group that supports transitioning to a single-payer health insurance system, found that Medicare Advantage MA overbills the federal government by at least $88 billion per year based on 2022 expending. That lower estimate accounts for common MA practices such as upcoding, whereby diagnoses are piled onto a patient's risk assessment to make them appear sicker than they actually are, resulting in a larger payment from the federal government. But when accounting for induced utilization, quote, the idea that people with supplemental coverage are likely to use more health care because their insurance pays for more of their cost, P&HB estimated that the annual overbilling total could be as high as $140 billion. Quote, this is unconscionable, unsustainable, and in our current healthcare system, unremarkable. What is unsustainable is our current healthcare system because it's not serving the people. It will not be sustained because 70,000 people, maybe more, die each year from lack of insurance. And many who have insurance, like 600,000 people, go bankrupt because they can't afford to pay the bills that result from dealing with our insurance companies. Quote again from the new report, but Medicare Advantage is just another example of the endless greed of the insurance industry, poisoning American healthcare, siphoning money from vulnerable patients while delaying and denying necessary and often life-saving treatment. Yeah, there are numerous instances of people not getting treatment when they needed it and dying, okay, as a result. There are even cases where people were on their deathbed and they finally got approval from their insurance companies when they were on their deathbed, but too late, so the people died anyway. If you want to find out about cases like that, a very good source is the movie Healing Us, which you can get screenings of in your local theater, okay, by making by making arrangements. Just Google Healing Us, the movie. Even if the more conservative figure is accurate, P&HB noted the excess funding that MA plans are receiving each year would be more than enough to expand traditional Medicare to cover dental, hearing, and vision. Traditional Medicare does not currently cover those benefits, which often leads patients to seek out supplemental coverage or switch to an MA plan. The Congressional Budget Office has estimated that adding dental, vision, hearing to Medicare and Medicaid would cost just under $84 billion in the most costly year of the expansion. Quote, well, there's obvious reason to fix these issues in MA and to expand traditional Medicare for the sake of all beneficiaries. New report states that deep structural problems with our healthcare system will only be fixed when we achieve improved Medicare for all. And of course, he's right. Or they are right. Properly spent, these overpayments could make a huge difference in the lives of Medicare beneficiaries. We could totally eliminate the Medicare Part B premiums, fund the entire Part D prescription drug program, establish dental, hearing, and vision coverage. Okay, and there is the estimate of billions per year. So there we are, a very useful chart. Bolstered by taxpayer subsidies. Again, there are no taxpayer subsidies. The Medicare Advantage has seen explosive growth since its creation in 2003, even as it comes under fire for fraud, denying necessary care, and other abuses. Look, this is the perfect example of profits over people. Medicare Advantage plans. The Medicare Trust Fund, which is not a trust fund but an accounting record, is being looted. That is, it's being cut down in terms of its total because of overbilling from the MA plans. So it looks like it's not sustainable, and that the time when Medicare hits a financial crisis is getting sooner, okay, and sooner. Now, there's no real crisis there. it's always possible for the Congress to appropriate full funding for Medicare every single year and full funding for Medicare for all, okay, every single year. Because the United States is a monetary sovereign and it can afford to do that. And I wish that PNHP would know about that or adopt that point of view so that it could point out that there's no problem with the United States affording Medicare for all. Okay, I'm going to scroll through this quickly now. Okay, I think I've read enough to make the point. There is a tremendous amount, okay, of overcharging. Here's a note. PNHP's report comes days after Cigna, a major Medicare Advantage provider, agreed to pay $172 million to settle allegations that it submitted false patient diagnosis data to the federal government in an attempt to receive a larger payment. So they're cheating. They're cheating. If they cheat, the penalty should immediately be throwing the companies out of the Medicare Advantage program. There shouldn't be a fine. There shouldn't be a settlement of $150 million, something like that. That's peanuts to these countries. The penalty should be immediately expulsion from the Medicare Advantage program. That's what the penalty should be. Quote, if seniors understood that the $165 coming out of their monthly Social Security checks was going essentially dollar for dollar into profiteering of Medicare Advantage, they would and should be angry about that. I think that we pay premiums to fund, we think we pay premiums to fund Medicare. The only reason we have to do that is because we're letting Medicare Advantage take that money from us. Well, again, it's not the taxpayer money supporting this, but they are continuing to perpetuate the myth that it is taxpayer money. Okay, read one of my books. Okay, go to Amazon and search on Joseph M. Firestone. You will find there, well, you find more than 7 books, but you will find 7 books dealing with MMT perspectives. So you can read some, okay, about MMT, and in particular, you can learn that taxpayer money doesn't fund not only taxpayer money, okay, but also the money of people who buy bonds. Tax revenue and bond proceeds do not fund federal spending. That is something we have known for a long time now. It's time that PNHP learned it. I'm getting pretty pissed off at them, stuck in the old paradigm. Okay, back to our okay, Friar Steve, show me the money. That is to say, show me the link from the UN. No, because Wikipedia is not, okay, an authority. It's what Wikipedia says. There are many people who have studied the situation, okay, in the Donbass and who verify the 14,000 fatalities. Andy Kennedy says, got to email that author and give him a dose of MMT reality, the vaccine against needless austerity and division. Robert Coleman says Medicare Advantage is terrible for the American people, so we need to replace it with Medicare for All or a state-based single-payer program. But here in California, the CalCare movement is a joke. Yes, I know, Robert. I'm so sorry. Friar Steve says the UN report less than 1,500 civilians on both sides, so your 14,000 is fake news. Now, the UN report is not the authority on this either necessarily. Let's see the UN report. Cite it. I have insurance yet can't get medical care because my insurance refuses to cover anything that will help me. Yep, there it is. There it is. That's why we need Medicare for All. Thank you, Brandy. And Friar Steve says Ukraine, more than 14,000 casualties to date. The link, Friar Steve, the link to the report so I can see what it says, so I can critique it for you. Ukraine, more than 14,000 casualties to date, but, quote, actual numbers are likely considerably higher, unquote. The report, Friar Steve. Joe, I doubt many people at PNHP know about MMT. Everybody knows about MMT in the sense that they know a book named The Deficit Myth has been written and that it's about a new paradigm for economics. The people are too frickin' lazy to go and read it or to read about it, or they're too frickin' dishonest because they find the taxpayer money meme to be so useful. I believe it may be the latter. There are a lot of bright people at PNHP. They know what they're doing. They know there's such a thing as MMT. They know there's a claim by MMT that taxpayer money and bond revenue don't fund federal spending. They know that. They just don't want to come to grips with that claim. They don't want to argue the case. They want to go along lazily lying to the public. I mean, they know, even if they believe that MMT is wrong, they know that the claim exists. They know that it calls into question their claim that taxpayer money does pay for things. Yet they don't have enough intellectual honesty to go examine the academic work on this and to develop a refutation of the academic work if they don't believe it. I'm telling you, Robert, it's intellectual irresponsibility. It's intellectual dishonesty. Andy Candy says, isn't the UN bought, by the US anyway? No, not anymore. It was bought very often for many years to some degree by the US, but it is no longer bought. There's lots of dissent inside of the UN, from the US position. Nor were UN reports always bought by the US. But reports from any source can be called into question. They are open to critique. There are so many people who have been witnesses to the shelling in Ukraine by the Ukraine government between 2014 and the Russian invasion in 2022. They are witness to the 14,000 casualties. If the UN doubts this figure, as it seems to, according to this report, I'd like to see what they have to say. then I can cross-check it with my other sources, and we can find out what is wrong with that UN report. Okay, folks. I think it's the end of another night at Empowering Democracy. Thank you very much for coming. I have to admit that Friar Steve was very entertaining tonight.
Yes.
And also, I want to thank everybody for coming and for participating. And I'll see you tomorrow night with the Dump the Corruption show. And I'm sure, are you going to have a show tomorrow night, Dee?
Yes.
Okay, you will have
I'm not
one.
going to have one on Saturday. I'm not going to have one on Saturday, but I'm going to have one tomorrow.
Okay, good. Okay, so we'll see you tomorrow night, okay, at 8 p.m.
Yes, you will. I just want to say here that it was really good seeing Brandy in the audience. I've
Oh, yeah,
always liked Brandy's comments.
actually for the second night in a row.
Yeah, she's very informative. You know, she does a lot of research.
Yes, I know. I
And
know she does. And I know that research is usually right
mhm.
as well. So, okay, we will see you tomorrow then, okay, at 8 o'clock. And I will be on, okay, at 9 uh, with a special program tomorrow that I've been giving a lot of thought to.
Okay.
Okay. So,
Okay, so what are we going to say? To please hit the like button, subscribe, and share?
and please buy us some coffees or go to my Patreon account and sign up as one of my supporters, one of my patrons, my patrons on Patreon. Okay, thank you, everybody. And
Yes,
good
thank
night.
you, and good night. Good night, Bonnie.
And good night, Dee.
Mhm.
Thank you, Dee. Good night.